I didn't save him to change the system. I saved him because leaving him invisible was worse.
This sci-fi story begins after the child is noticed, when protection stops being quiet, and someone must answer for the choice that was made.
The moment protection is noticed, survival stops being a private matter. Until then, the child had existed in the margins of the world, unseen not because he was hidden, but because no system had reason to look for him. He had learned early that staying alive meant staying quiet, less movement, less sound, less presence. In the aftermath of war, children like him survived by becoming statistics that never fully formed. No one questioned that. Not because it was cruel, but because it was efficient. Systems rebuild by focusing on what can be measured, not on what quietly disappears. The child understood this without anyone explaining it to him. Attention had always felt dangerous. To be noticed meant to be corrected, moved, or erased. So he learned how to fade. That changed the moment someone chose to see him. The woman did not touch him at first. She did not speak. Observation alone would not have broken protocol. Watching was allowed. Distance was expected. But protection, even subtle, even temporary, created a shift that could not be undone. The world did not react immediately. Systems rarely do. They wait, they confirm, they compare outcomes, and then without warning they respond. The first sign was not confrontation, it was adjustment, access points closed, paths rerouted. Spaces that once felt neutral began to feel defined. The child sensed it before anyone acknowledged it. The quiet around him changed. Silence became deliberate. He did not know what was happening, only that something had begun to move because he was no longer invisible. They did not come for him. That would have been unnecessary. He was not the problem. He was the result. When the summons came, it was directed at the woman. Not urgently, not publicly. The system did not accuse her of wrongdoing. It did not need to. Accusations imply disagreement. This was not a disagreement. It was an evaluation. They asked her why she intervened. The question was framed as procedural, almost polite. Motivation, they clarified, was irrelevant. Impact was what required explanation. Her actions had altered an expected outcome. A life that should have quietly ended had continued. That continuation suggested tolerance for exception, and exceptions, if left unexamined, become precedents. Precedents destabilize order. She listened without interrupting. Defense would have changed nothing. She understood that this was not about punishment or forgiveness. It was about responsibility. Protection had shifted the burden. The moment she chose to keep the child visible, she became accountable for what visibility would produce. The child was not present for this exchange, but he felt its weight. Protection had once felt like safety. Now it felt like anticipation. He understood that something was being decided about him without his involvement, something that would determine how long protection could last and under what conditions. He had survived by staying unnoticed. Now survival required something else, something he did not yet know how to provide. When she returned, she did not explain everything. She explained only what mattered. That being seen changes the rules. That attention is never neutral. That protection is not the absence of danger but the beginning of consequence. He asked her if she would stop protecting him. She did not answer right away. The silence between them was enough to tell him that the question itself carried weight. What neither of them said was already clear. The system was not interested in reversing her choice. It was interested in managing its outcome. If the child could not disappear quietly, he would be observed, defined, classified. The system did not move quickly after that. It never does. Speed suggests emotion, and emotion suggests uncertainty. Instead, it waited. It observed patterns, calculated probabilities, and compared outcomes that had not yet happened. The woman understood this kind of waiting. It was not mercy. It was preparation. Decisions made slowly tend to last longer. The child noticed the waiting in small ways. The places where he was allowed to be became more specific. The moments when he was left alone became shorter. He was not restrained, not questioned, not threatened. But freedom began to feel conditional. He had once survived by being forgotten. Now he survived by being monitored, and the difference unsettled him more than danger ever had. The woman remained close, though closeness itself began to feel like defiance. Protection was no longer invisible. It had been acknowledged, measured, and categorized. She knew that every choice she made from this point forward would be interpreted not as care, but as influence. The system was no longer asking whether the child should exist. It was deciding how he would be allowed to exist. When the decision finally came, it was not delivered as an order. Orders can be resisted. This came as a framework. The child would remain under observation. His movements would be limited, his interactions noted. He would be studied as an anomaly, a deviation that required understanding. Survival would be permitted, but only within defined boundaries. The system would not erase him. It would contain him. The woman was given a choice. She could withdraw. If she stepped away, responsibility would be transferred entirely to the system. The child would continue to live, but not as someone protected. He would become data. Predictable, managed, safe in the way systems define safety. Or she could remain involved. If she stayed, she would accept permanent accountability for the outcome of her interference. Any deviation, any unexpected result would be attributed not to chance but to her influence. This was the real consequence of being seen. Not punishment, not exile, but obligation. Protection had transformed into ownership, not in the sense of control, but in the sense of responsibility that could not be abandoned without cost. The system did not care which choice she made. Both outcomes restored order. What mattered was clarity. The child did not fully understand the choice placed before her, but he felt its weight in the way she looked at him. He asked if he had done something wrong. She told him the truth. No, he had done nothing wrong. That was the part the system found most difficult to process. A life that required protection without justification disrupted the logic it relied on to function. He asked if things would go back to how they were before. She did not answer immediately. Before had been built on invisibility. That path no longer existed. Being seen could not be undone, only redefined. The world had adjusted around his presence, and it would not return to indifference. In the end, her decision was quiet. There was no announcement, no declaration of intent. She stayed, not because the system demanded it, but because leaving would have completed the process she had begun. Protection without continuity is abandonment disguised as compliance. She would not allow that, not for him. The system registered her choice and recalibrated. Oversight increased, parameters tightened, observation intensified. Nothing dramatic happened. That was how she knew the decision had been accepted. Stability had been restored, not by erasing the anomaly, but by binding it to accountability. The child sensed the change immediately. Protection no longer felt temporary. It felt structured, heavy, permanent in a way that frightened him more than being alone ever had. He realized then that survival was no longer just about staying alive. It was about enduring attention, carrying the weight of being someone whose existence required explanation. Some lives survive by remaining unseen. Others survive because someone refuses to look away. But being chosen comes with a cost.